hotel in the village.
It's a small town that needs 4 districts now
Oh, yes.
because of threat of a lawyer from
Yes,
LA.
it is.
Did you remember that letter that guy wrote?
We're ready?
Yes.
All right. Good evening and welcome everyone to the special joint meeting of the Solvang City Council and the Solvang Planning Commission for Monday, March 7th, 2022. I now call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Councilmember Clark.
I'm here.
Mayor Pro Tem Infante.
Here.
Councilmember Arona. Here. Councilmember Thomas.
Here.
Mayor Urick.
Here.
Commissioner Gold.
Here.
Commissioner Jameson.
Here.
Commissioner Peterson.
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Here.
Chair Williams.
Here.
Excellent. And we've already had the Pledge of Allegiance, so we don't need that officially. Correct. So we'll go, Madam Clerk. would you-
It's up to you, Mayor.
Yeah, I think we should. We're all together. Let's do that. Mayor Pro Tem Infante, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
You can stand, put your hand over your heart, and we'll start. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, would you please read item number 1?
General Plan Update, Preferred Land Use Alternative Adoption. Receive a report on community input and General Plan Advisory Committee recommendations for the preferred land use alternative and adopt the preferred land use alternative.
Is there a report?
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and this meeting will be followed by the Planning Commission. The Chair of the Planning Commission just made a suggestion to me to let everybody know that the item on Planning Commission agenda, which has to do with the old lumber yard or 1783 Mission Drive, has been requested to be pulled from today's agenda by the applicant. So in case anybody wanted to speak on that, just giving everybody a heads up that likely the Planning Commission will move that item to the future. Now, turning back to your joint meeting, this is the second joint meeting between the City Council and the Planning Commission as part of this comprehensive process. This is the first time the City of Solvang is working on a comprehensive update of the general plan update, including all the elements. We are also adding an element for economic development, as well as updating every element that's already existing, well, most of which are required, and then also the design element, which is an elected element for the City of Solvang to have. So where we are in the process now is that we have just about completed the alternative choices, phase 3, and we're moving into actual phase 4, which is working on all of the specific elements. The last time the joint session was held between Planning Commission and the City Council, as you recall, it was a proposal for you to adopt guiding principles, which were adopted at the time, and will continue to lead this development forward. The next time we'll be seeing all of you together again with the Planning Commission and the City Council will be when the actual general plan elements will be brought to you for adoption. With that, I'll turn it over to our general plan consultant, Brent, with Meteor Harnishing.
Perfect, thank you. If we can bring the presentation up. Fantastic. Good evening, Council and Commissioners behind me. Good to see all of you this evening. Tonight is a critical path as part of the general plan update. As Zini had mentioned, this is wrapping up the alternatives phase of the project. And tonight we hope that both the Commission will make a recommendation to the Council and the Council will look toward adopting a preferred land use alternative for inclusion into the general plan. Let's see. You don't want to hit the next slide. So I just want to give you just a rundown of the meeting this evening. First, we'll go over the general plan timeline. This should look very familiar for those of you who have been through this process. It's our bubble diagram that shows where we've been and where we're going. I'll give a brief overview of the alternatives process and then move into our general plan advisory commission and their recommended preferred alternative that's for you tonight. After that, we'll move into what I like to call City Council and Planning Commission deliberation. This is where we open the floor to both bodies to discuss the preferred alternative that should be included in the general plan. And then to wrap up this evening, we will take a vote first of the Planning Commission. Planning Commission will make a formal recommendation, and then second, council at that point can make a decision to adopt or continue. Next slide. You can click through it. So this diagram lays out the several phases of the project. This project started back in December of 2020, rounded out with an existing conditions and trends phase, phase 2. The existing conditions and trends workbook is online on the Plan Solving website that lays the foundation for the project moving forward. Phase 3 is our alternative choices. Phase 4 is preparing the plan. We wrap up with CEQA, that's your California Environmental Quality Act, that's where we assess the plan and any further mitigation to offset any substantial impacts. And then we round out with adoption. So currently, we're wrapping up phase 3, moving into phase 4. Phase 4 is the meat of a general plan effort. It includes what's known as the policy document. That includes all of your goals, policies, and what are known as implementation programs. That's your checklist that help guide future decisions for the city moving forward. So as we move into that phase, we're going to look at a series of elements that are both required by the state of California per the general plan guidelines, as well as several optional elements, including economic development and community design. And we'll bring those forward first for GPAC's review, and then they'll work their way through commission and council. During that time frame, the public will also have the ability to review and comment on those before adoption. So the alternatives process, this started last year. We wrapped up our community workshop number 2, starting to talk about if there was future change in solving, what would that be? And as part of this, we look at a comparative analysis of different scenarios. It's not to say that one scenario occurs over the other. As we're all aware through COVID and even now in the beginning of 2022, there are a lot of market forces. There are global effects that change the market, and you cannot predict that. But this at least gives a glimpse into 3 different comparisons of if certain changes were to occur in regards to land use changes, what would those implications be and what would the change be? Primarily tied to population, employment, and not only including the amount of dwelling units that could be projected as part of that. And this is, what I want to point out here, it's important to look at this as the large pictures, the 30,000 foot level. So when we're looking at these land use alternatives, we just want to make sure that they're not getting down to the granular level, getting into development standards. We're just looking at what are the large picture implementation, large picture changes that could occur if any of these scenarios came to be. If you remember, as part of the alternatives report, we looked at a focus area. And then within that focus area, we analyzed 2 land use designations as part of your general plan. HDR, high density residential, and the TRC. The reason why we looked at both of those is both of those designations had the most room for capacity or future growth. And as part of that, we brought those, the focus area and the alternatives report to the GPAC and to the community in Community Workshop 3, and allowed everybody to weigh in on how they felt the focus area was developed. Did it cover all aspects of the community that were to be analyzed as part of this? And were the designations selected, were those accurate, or should there be more designations included? And at the last council meeting that I attended back on February 14th, we ran through all of those summaries and responses with the council. We can go back, perfect. As part of the alternatives, there were 3, an A, a B, and a C. Alternative A, think of that as a business as usual approach. We like to say that this alternative A looks at the land use designations as they are described now. So there's no change to the density or development standards. That does not mean that growth will not occur under A, because there still is vacant and underutilized land within the city. So if you look at alternative A in the alternatives report, there is growth over the next 20 years just due to land availability. Alternative B is called a medium density infill. it takes the density in the two designations, HDR and TRC, up a notch, and it also brings up what's known as the floor area ratio, the FAR. And what that does is that allows for more square footage on a parcel. That can increase the non-residential components, so commercial, retail, and office. That also allows for more space for residential units if they're added. And as part of this, as in B and C, your current general plan does not allow residential in the TRC, even though the zoning permits it. So there's a consistency error there. So as part of the general plan, we're gonna go back and make sure that those align, and that if the residential is allowed in a mixed use format in your zoning, we need to make sure that it's also stated in your general plan. Alternative C, we like to call that a high density infill oriented. That just takes the density up another notch in TRC and HDR. So those were the three alternatives proposed, and those are the three alternatives that the community weighed in on. I will say through the community feedback received, alternative C was, a no-go. Less than 10% of the community was in favor of C. It altered the community's image and uniqueness too far from where the community members wanted to head. Alternative A and alternative B, they came in approximately 35 and 36%, so the community was pretty much split even between both of those. There are cases to be made in the summary report from both advocates of A and of B. A, going back to the unique small town charm of Solvang, and it's important to retain that going forward, even under new state legislation. Advocates for B noted in the summary that it's important to have more affordable housing options, and the only way to do that is to increase the density to allow projects to pencil. So you get both sides of the spectrum there. Next slide. So at our last meeting of the GPAC, we brought forth the community summary, which outlines all of the feedback. So there were 189 participants, about 35 questions in a survey. Not every participant answered every question, but it did give us a summation of the average community sentiment towards some of these alternatives and moving forward in the general plan. The GPAC reviewed the summary, reviewed the report, and actually deliberated for their full 2-hour meeting. It was a great meeting. It was roll up your sleeves. There was a lot of discussion on which best represents not only the community's desires, but still meets state legislation, but also aligns with the guiding principles that council adopted last year. And it's important that those are factored in and then eventually make their way into each of the general plan elements moving forward. At the meeting, we took a straw poll right at the beginning, just to take the temperature of the GPAC. C was off the table as a formal recommendation. And there was, the group was split between A and B, and that's where we basically started our discussion on what aspects of A or B are important to maintain and which ones aren't. Through that discussion, the GPAC voted unanimously to not have any of the designations or recommend no designations within the city to go above 20 dwelling units an acre. And that's mentioned on the motion here on the screen. So as part of that, that does eliminate the increase in density that was seen in B and C. So the foundation for their motion started with alternative A. They wanted to make sure that the TRC still allowed residential, and so in order to do that, we need to make sure that the 20 dwelling units an acre is mentioned in the general plan, which is currently stated in your zoning code. Also, as part of that, they also came to a consensus, the GPAC, that it was important to look at other areas in the community that could support mixed-use style development and the inclusion of housing, but not necessarily standalone housing development, so you don't lose your commercial tax base. So as part of that, we looked at a series of other designations as part of your general plan: professional office, there's a general commercial and a retail commercial. The GPAC discussed including or allowing residential in those 3 designations up to 20 dwelling units an acre. It's important to note here, and this was brought up in our community workshop at the last council meeting and in our GPAC, that when you say 20 dwelling units an acre, that's if you have an entire acre of land, maximum 20 dwelling units allowed. But if you have a smaller parcel of land, the allowable units shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. So if you get down to a 10,000 square foot lot, you're not gonna be able to put on 20 dwelling units an acre, because that goes above what the percentage is. So that's just one thing I want to point out. I think there was some confusion early on that anywhere it's allowed, you can put 20, but if the parcel is smaller than an acre, you can't fit 20, because 20 is the maximum. So through that discussion, the GPAC pulled together a motion. It was unanimous, 14 yes, 1 GPAC member was absent. And the motion is to recommend alternative 1, or also known as alternative A, with some modifications. First is to not allow residential density to exceed 20 dwelling units an acre, so that's across the board. To allow mixed use in the tourist, commercial, and the other 2 commercial general plan designations, retail and general, as well as professional office. Third is to increase the allowable floor area ratio for these designations to 0.65. And that's to allow the additional capacity for commercial and non-residential uses. So if we're allowing 20 dwelling units an acre, you're allowing more commercial, we want to try to find that balance between employment and residential. The fourth one was to have a maximum height of 35 feet, so that's to maintain what is currently allowed, not to go above that. In the summary, there was actually a question in the survey that asked the community what their comfort level was on height. The average answer was 40. Usually you want to go in 10-foot increments, 35 to 45. Additional 5 feet is not going to get living space, probably wouldn't even get a pitched roof. And so that was part of the discussion, was to maintain it at 35 to keep the visual clearances that are currently here. And then lastly, the Mission Oaks property. If you've been following the general plan, this property's been brought up several times. Currently, Mission Oaks in your general plan is designated as HDR. The underlying zoning is a DR 1.8. So there's a disconnect there. We worked with city staff to look back at prior approvals and came down to an answer that back in 2008 there was a mapping error when the land use element was last updated that redesignated Mission Oaks to high density. In actuality, it should be a low medium density residential, so it's consistent with the underlying zoning. So the GPAC recommended that, is making a formal recommendation to Commission and Council that when and if the land use alternative is adopted tonight, that change is made as part of that. I know that was a lot. I just want to show you some of these changes here so you can see where we're heading. So I highlighted the low, medium density residential on the top. I'm just pointing out where Mission Oaks is. It's that dark blue currently. That's where we need to change the general plan based on the error back to be consistent with your zoning. And then I wanted to highlight the commercial areas that are under consideration through the GPAC motion to be allowed for mixed use.
I got a response that said that YouTube has stopped working. We have a technical issue apparently.
Cyber attack.
So the 4 designations: professional office, tourist, commercial, general, and retail. And sometimes the colors on these maps, it can get very difficult to try to locate where these are. There's not many parcels that fall within professional office, general, and retail commercial, so I have some arrows pointing out on the map to where they are. And then on the far right, you'll see all of these designations will allow up to 20 dwelling units an acre, maximum 35 feet in height with an FAR of 0.65. So that concludes my portion of the presentation. I will hand it back to the mayor to begin deliberation between commission and council.
All right. Are there any questions of the staff report from the commissioner or any council members? No questions?
Actually, I do have one question. The
Commissioner Rodriguez, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The TRC, do you know how many acres in total is within the TRC as far as mixed use going forward for incorporating housing in that in the future.
Before you answer, Justin, could you say it up at the mic so everybody out can hear you?
I'm used to having the.
Yeah, I think we can, are we picking up the planning
Are we picking
commission
it up
voice
out
from
there?
over there? Okay,
For what it's worth, we could hear him on Zoom before.
thank you.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
So a question about the TRC going forward as far as mixed use is concerned. If you are going to be adding housing into the TRC for the future, do we know how many acres the TRC is as far as regarding that 20, how many housing you could fit in? Because if you're only maximizing 20 per acre, wouldn't that limit how much housing you can put in the TRC? So that's a question I have.
Yeah, so your tourist commercial right now is approximately 59 acres. Now that 59 acres is comprised of hundreds of parcels, some of them just a few thousand square feet. If I can scroll through the report to get to how many units, let me see if I can locate this.
If I could make a comment on that too, that's, no, they can hear us, they said.
I think they can hear.
There's a mic right here. At the GPAC meeting, that's why, because I sit on the GPAC as Joni does, is representing this body. That's why we extended it to professional office, general retail, not only just right now it's TRC. We extended it to all commercial and professional office. So that's a good question, but the real question is how much acreage do we have in the PO and all commercial to really get it, because there's all those categories.
Right, that makes
So we extended it.
Yeah, 'cause it's like apartments above New Frontiers now. That's
Correct.
mixed use, and
Or,
that's a great use of
correct.
that.
Or
upstairs.
any other building in town that's in general, commercial, retail, TRC, or professional office.
And it helps get the RENA numbers up.
It helps get the RENA numbers up. Not that we're gonna build them, but you're giving the opportunity
Right.
for a developer to come in and do it. As we noted, many of the TRC buildings in town really are never gonna get apartments on the second floors of those. They're too small, they're too little, unless you knock them down and do it, you've got elevator issues. So while we do have some apartments, we thought expanding out to these other zones would certainly help.
And for-
And keeping it at 35 feet then, and not going up higher. Yeah, with the trade-off,
And for the record, that was Commissioner Peterson.
sorry.
No worries.
Well,
Just wanna make sure we have
One camera on
everyone.
us and one camera on you, but you know,
I will point out as well, mixed use, and this was part of the discussion with the GPAC, mixed use can come in different forms. There's really two predominant types. There's something called vertical mixed use, which think of it as your uses are stacked. So you have commercial on the bottom, office on the second floor, residential above, and so forth. Then there's something called horizontal mixed use, which means you have different uses on a single property, but they're not all in the same building. So you can have a commercial storefront along the street, and you can have a solely residential building in the back. We've talked about this with GPAC, and as part of GPAC's review of the land use element, we'll start to get into more of those granular details about the type of mixed use that is most appropriate within each of these designations.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
In the conversations you had leading up to this, was there any pro go from 35 to 45 feet from the members?
In the GPAC? No.
Okay.
I would say that was probably one of the first items that came up to flag.
Yeah. Any other questions from council members or commissioners?
Nope.
No. Close that discussion, and do we bring it out to public comment?
Public comment?
Public comment, anybody want to, I don't have any speaker slips. Oh, I guess I do. Stephen Martin. If you could come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name's Stephen Martin. I live in Mission Oaks, so you've answered one of my questions, that there was an error in a mapping, and I think a number of people spotted that and made comment to that effect. The only thing I wanted to add was that I think as we go forward with our plan, that aside from the actual types of use, meaning residential, commercial, industrial, et cetera, that we might look to creating categories of design and thematic consistency in the community, because I think from the comments, I read, I think almost all the comments that came in, and there were an awful lot of comments that said Solvang proper is Danish, and people come here because of that, and they love it. And then I think other people talked about the Santinez River frontage and maybe making some sort of riverfront development there. And the question might be what type of schematic, or what type of thematic or architectural or other type of planning do we really want to undertake, and how do we do that? I mean, Santa Barbara is probably a good example where they, after the earthquake back in the 20s, they rebuilt the whole city, or the damaged part, and they did it with a Spanish style. And we have a great deal of Spanish influence here with the mission and the population of people who have a Hispanic background, and that we might want to consider doing a combination of both preservation of the Danish heritage and culture, but along with taking a look at developing new areas with a consistent style to continue to make our village as beautiful as possible, and not trying to recreate necessarily or force additional Danish architecture, but certainly not wanting to just build boxes or buildings that really don't add to the beauty. I think most people support development, but they want beauty. My wife happens to be an artist, Marybelle Laparliere, and she would like to have been here tonight, but could not. But I think people really do appreciate beauty, and that can come in the form of architecture and in the form of landscaping and pedestrian walkways. So I hope as we go forward that we can take a look at how to do that, as opposed to just thinking about the raw terms of residential, commercial, industrial. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. And I had a second speaker slip, Elizabeth Breen.
Use the timer.
I hit my back to that. Hi, thank you, Mayor and Council. Elizabeth Breen Solvang. I am a member of the GPAC, also a homeowner, a resident who lives in a mixed-use building in the TRC, and I am the association executive for the San Ynez Valley Association of Realtors. So I deal with this housing issue on a daily basis. One of the things that when we started this GPAC meeting that I kind of wanted to bring back to everyone was that we did agree, all of us, on certain guiding principles. And the guiding principle on jobs and housing was a wide range of housing options and living wage jobs provide a high quality of life. Solvang is committed to providing a variety of obtainable, amenity-rich housing and sustainable neighborhoods for its residents. And so I think that's really important. And when we were in our meeting, we were the same when we started, as the consultant told you. We were kind of split between A and B, the way the residents were. But when we looked at it and said, okay, if we still have that guiding principle that we agreed to in our heads here, A, status quo, is really does not fulfill that principle. So how do we make something that will work? And I know there are people who really want no change and they wanted A, and the council has to weigh what they're hearing from constituents and what you're hearing from the consultants and what you're hearing from the GPAC. But I would just encourage you to really approve what the GPAC spent a lot of time and effort working on. And just to give you a sense of it, I know everyone knows that we're in kind of a housing crisis, but I pulled some numbers today. The local rental vacancy rate is 0. There are no vacant rentals in the whole valley, let alone Solvang. And when I pulled today, we had about 15 homes on the market, and 2 of those under $1 million. And that's been the case for several months now. So we're really in a bad spot right now with housing. And I think that this alternative, and kudos to my people on GPAC that were creative in coming up with this, and we could actually pinpoint areas, especially in professional office, where we could see mixed use that would not affect neighborhoods. We're not talking about somebody putting 20 units on an acre lot that's a residential single-family home lot right now. We're talking about areas of the valley that could be developed, or at least opening those up for development. So I appreciate your consideration of it, and I'm really pleased with the work we did, and I think a unanimous vote in that GPAC is something to take note of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the third speaker slip I have is Denise Johns.
Thank you, Mayor Irwin. Good evening, council members. Denise Johns. I live here in Solvang and very much appreciate your work and the Planning Commission's work on developing the land use plan. I am disappointed to hear that there's not been further consideration of higher density residential development in downtown. As Ms. Breen was just pointing out, we are in a housing crisis. And I'm a professional landscape architect and am always very concerned about the lack of available affordable housing for individuals who are working in the communities and attending and working in our shops and our grocery stores and have to commute in every day. Not only is it an issue for them, it's also related to climate and climate change and additional traffic, etc. If we're able to accommodate additional housing, lower income housing, especially higher density, you do create a more vibrant downtown with more diversity, more interesting, more after hours presence, and actually more safety in the downtown area. I realize that's not what the community is leaning towards, but I'm hoping as you deliberate further that you'll consider higher density residential multi-use in downtown Solvang. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those are the last of the speaker slips that I have. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this topic? Seeing none, take it out to Zoom. Is there anyone on Zoom wishing to speak at this time?
Please raise your hand or unmute yourself.
Seeing none, bring it back for final comments. Thoughts? Commissioners? Aaron, go ahead.
Aaron Peterson, Planning Commission, in another issue that we brought up, we did recommend it, we don't have that on our agenda, but we had talked at length about perhaps our city parking lots, a city, private, public combination to build above parking lots like they do in Santa Barbara, but with residential, lower income or moderate apartments. It's city property. If we had a developer that wanted to do it and make it very pretty and still have underground parking or lower first layer park. So those are the big lots in Solvang, all 4 parking lots. And so perhaps that's the next step that we could kind of come up with. And the other comment is this gentleman here, I can't remember your name, I'm sorry.
Steve Martin.
Steve Martin asked about the design element, and that is coming up. That's an element in our general plan that we will focus on and encourage people to come to that, because it should not just be about the TRC being Northern European Danish. We have those other areas of development that we definitely, I love those ideas you came up with, different themes, so we don't just scatter stuff. We actually have in our general plan now that we discourage Danish European outside of the TRC, to give it that, so it doesn't just melt away. So when we talk about that, just keep an eye on that so that you can come to those GPAC meetings to talk about that element.
Thank you for those comments. I know we had discussed that same topic at our last council meeting. So it's something I know we want to try to maybe hit up County Housing Authority, see if we can work out something for some funding to possibly help us with our parking problems, as well as taking care of some of the housing issues that we do definitely need. So, I don't have any comments. Is there any other comments here? Right now, do we take it back to the commission? I know that we have to kind of do this in order, so I believe the commission needs to
Yes, Mayor, so
discuss.
make a vote.
When there is, if there's no more deliberation, then we would ask the planning commission to take a vote first as a recommendation to you, and then we will take a vote of the city council.
So before we vote, are there any other?
I think we've covered it
Any concerns, issues? Shall we go ahead and take a vote to approve the alternative one as proposed?
So moved.
all. Second it.
Clarification, is that alternative one, or is that a GPAC recommendation?
Are they the same?
I think
No,
that's.
the GPAC recommendation, if we could go back, is,
It's
it started with alternative A, but there were some modifications made to it, so there is an
Okay,
addition
so I
of.
was differentiating between A and alternative one. So, yeah, so I'm proposing that we approve the GPAC proposal.
Recommend alternative one as presented by GPAC.
Okay, that's clear enough.
Okay, I second that.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
And I think we're gonna bring it back for us for a motion as well to adopt the preferred land use alternative.
I'll move that we accept the GPAC land use alternative.
I'll second it.
And the planning commission as well, recommendation.
Roll call.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Infante,
Yes.
Councilmember Rona,
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas,
Yes.
Mayor Urick.
Yes,
Passes 5-0.
excellent. With that, thank you again for all of your time. Really appreciate that, and the members of the GPAC for the hours that they spent hashing that out for the rest of the community and for us. So thank you very much for your time.
And just one more thing, I want to remind the council that the next steps of part of this process are the general plan policy, the policy document, which includes all the elements. So those members of the GPAC that are here, your hashing is not done yet. You still have about 4 or 5 more months to work through all of that. So the next time that we will see both the planning commission and council together will be when you see the complete general plan in its entirety.
Excellent. And when is that anticipated?
That is anticipated starting probably later this year. You'll start to see drafts of it while we're preparing the EIR.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So with that, I'll call the meeting adjourned at 6:27.
We got a half hour wait.
Didn't go away. Yeah. Yes.
44?
Yeah. Go ahead and start. Planning Commission meeting for March 7th, 2022 is called to order. Do we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Gold.
I'm here.
Commissioner Gold.
I'm here.
Still here.
I'm still here. No matter who you are, I'm not going anywhere.
Commissioner Jameson.
Hi, I am here.
Commissioner Peterson.
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Present and counterpart.
Chair Williams.
Still here. Let's do the pledge, just. Scott, would you please?
Sure. Right hand over your heart. Let's begin. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, requests for continuance, withdrawals, addition, next agenda items, anything?
So we have one request for continuance or basically withdrawal at this point without an exact date planned for item number 3, which is the preliminary review of 1783 Mission Drive Hotel and Apartments, the old lumberyard. That's a request by the applicant.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Conflicts or ex parte communications? Seeing none.
The only one I want to say is that we spoke about it last planning commission, but one of the agenda items had to do with sheds, and I just want to make sure that the council was still, if it's a citywide item, that I'm able to speak on it.
It is citywide.
It's the same item.
Yeah, it's the
Chelsea.
same item, just want to be clear again.
It's the same item, so again, as I said before, the ultimate decision of whether you have a conflict is yours. But the facts haven't changed from last meeting. We're just bringing back the item to reflect additional edits based on the Planning Commission's recommendations and comments to staff last time.
Okay, thank you, Chelsea. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting on February 17th? February 7th.
Before we do that, may I ask a question about those minutes?
Absolutely, now's the time.
Thank you. On page 34, discussion items, there was the discussion about the Solving Farmers Market that was potentially going to be, or discussed being moved to Lot 2. And I was just wondering what the status is, or is there a timeline, is there a path that we were taking on?
So I can address that really quickly. The farmer's market location has been modified, but it's not moving to Lot 2. The general discussion was about expanding of the footprint of the farmer's market, not to only include the closure of Copenhagen Drive, to expand it onto First Street between the two alleys.
Between the two?
Two alleys.
Oh, alleys.
So, you know, it basically closes half a block between Mission and Copenhagen on First, and then half a block between Copenhagen and Oak.
They gave them more space so because they could open lot, is it Lot 1 in downtown? It was just so they get egress into the lot.
It's Lot 2.
Yeah.
So
Lot 2,
when
yeah.
Copenhagen closure was modified, that became too tight for the farmer's market to fit everyone. So we have expanded the footprint to add the additional closure in those two half blocks.
So that's happening.
That's happening every Wednesday, yes.
Well, and that also, we made that recommendation, and then the city council now is looking at opening Copenhagen Street again, which probably will come back again to be changed.
Will we
It might go
revisit
back
this
to the
again?
old footprint, in other words, we don't know.
So TBD. Oh, well, that said, then I can come to this.
If I would, though, alert you, as the planning commissioners, that there was another set of minutes provided to you in your folders, to where there was a motion that needed to be clarified. So, There's a revision to the February 7th to where the motion in the minutes should be revised that the Planning Commissioner Peterson directed staff to schedule a joint session with DRC and update the proposed code amendments to reflect Commissioner Peterson's suggested edits, seconded by Commissioner Jamieson and carried 4-0 with Commissioner Gold absent.
Sounds good.
That said,
And just to point out, we're approving the minutes for both our February 7th meeting and our joint meeting with DRC on the 17th.
choose at the same time? Okay, then
Getting confused.
I'll make that motion to approve the minutes from February 7th and from the meeting, the joint meeting on February 17th,
Including the correction.
including the correction that was just noted by our city manager.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
So, I guess we're gonna get, we're gonna review the planning and building division projects. We'll do that now.
Good evening, Lori Tamura, Planning Division. So we brought forward to you our updated list of projects. Currently, we have 3 projects in process that have been submitted as official applications. One of them is the Sampson Medical Clinic, and we just went through the 30-day review. They will be responding back to the comments that we made on this project. Did go to the DRC for a preliminary review, and so they're responding to those comments. The other project that was submitted was the old bank building on Mission Drive. There is a proposal to convert that building to a deli and restaurant area. And we're in the 30-day review period for that project, and it will be coming before the Planning Commission when it's ready. The last item that we have is a project that currently would be reviewed by the planning director, which is a conditional use permit for Coast Range. They're doing a barbecue pit in their back area, and that is a minor conditional use permit that can be approved by the director, which is Sina. And so we will be going through our regular review of that project, and then also public notice, and those are the current active projects. We do have, again, the conceptual review that was pulled from this agenda for the lumberyard for some additional work with the applicant and staff. And we have one other project that we're taking to the DRC, which is the corner of Alisal and Mission Drive. The little piece that's landscaped right now, there is a proposal for a very small hotel with quaint little cottages on it. So we're in a preliminary review on that project also. So those are the current projects that we're working on, and we have a number of other tasks that we're doing. One of the things is because we're getting some additional applications in now that may take some more extensive environmental review. We're working on putting together our consultants list that has not been refreshed in a number of years. So we're going to be going through that process also. I'm available for any questions that you may have on the project list, and that's it for now.
The small hotel and cottages that you mentioned, is the address on Mission or is the address on Alisal?
The address is on Mission. It's Lilysad is the name of the project, and I don't know if that's on the list that just came in.
1420 Mission?
No, it's 1704.
You know, it's
1704 is on the boutique
where the olive trees are.
It's
Yes,
first
that's,
item on
yeah, it's the 1704, it's a boutique hotel, is what it's listed as.
One more time, where is it?
It is right next to the old bank on Mission Drive.
The olive
and Allison.
trees are.
Old gas station.
Old gas
Oh, the
station.
other lease land from the archdiocese?
correct.
Yes.
Okay. Right, darn.
Everybody knows it by something.
I remember the gas station.
Yeah, so do I. Those are the current projects that we're working through right now.
I just have a question about the water wheel project. Is what's going on with the lawsuit with the previous owner going to deter that from moving ahead?
I would say that we are continuing to work with the applicant who owns the building. That's the owner of the building right now, and we're continuing with those plans.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Moving on to public hearing items. Item A, to adopt the Title 11
Chair
zoning
Williams,
ordinance.
if I may, did we, I apologize if I missed this from being on Zoom, but did we allow for public comment on items not on the agenda?
I'm sorry, we did not.
If we could go back to that
Let's
briefly.
backtrack and do that right now.
Thank you.
Does anybody have comments on or want to present anything that is not on the agenda for tonight? I have no speaker slips. Nobody here online? Somebody wanted to.
If anybody online would like to speak on items not on the agenda, please raise your hand or unmute yourself. See none?
Anybody on the phone? Okay, thank you for pointing that out. Now we'll move to item 2 on the zoning ordinance discussion and hopefully approval. Could we have a staff presentation, please?
Item 2, just to remind everybody, is a third time here discussing this item. Staff has met again based on your last comments. Our planning, as well as our assistant city attorney, Chelsea. We've also had discussions in addition with the fire department. And staff is here to present the updates today and the latest recommendations.
I'll let Chelsea start with the presentation because it's going through the various changes of the ordinance. So, Chelsea?
Yes, happy to. Thank you, commissioners. So I'll start with what has changed from last time, since we're all familiar with the scope of this project, or excuse me, this item. But at the last meeting, you all requested that we circle back with the fire department to better understand whether the requirements that we had proposed before were actually in the, state fire code, or if those were merely recommendations from the fire department, and get some clarification on what the fire department really was recommending. And so we've done that, and we were able to determine that the fire code really the only relevant requirement is that there has to be a road that's accessible to a fire apparatus, aka a fire truck, within 150 feet of all portions of exterior walls of the first story of a building. So to put that in plain terms, fire truck has to be able to pull up to a house, and they have to be able to get around the house with a fire hose, and a fire hose is 150 feet long. So that doesn't give us very many specific standards to have to work around. In implementing that fire code requirement, the Santa Barbara Fire Department provided some recommendations that they would like to see, but again, these are not required under the state fire code. And those recommendations included that there be a minimum structure width, a pathway of 3 feet in the side yard and the rear yard, and that's the minimum distance that Santa Barbara Fire said was needed to get a fire crewman through with all his or her gear on. But that clear area does not have to be against the property line or against the building, just 3 feet corridor somewhere in the side setback and rear setback. And also that They like to see and recommend having 5 feet minimum distance between accessory structures along a side yard so that they can have a place every so often along the building to put up a ladder where an accessory structure would not be impeding their ladder access to a roof. And those were, again, those more specific requirements are not required under the California Fire Code, but that's what our local fire department likes to see when they're trying to make sure that they have access around a building. And so staff incorporated those recommendations into what we proposed for code amendments. In addition to that, the commission asked us to look further at how to accommodate smaller sheds, so sheds smaller than 9 feet tall, because as we had originally proposed it, we were requiring a minimum 5 feet distance from the property line for all sheds. And there was some discussion of maybe smaller sheds can be closer to the property line or right up against the property line because they're not going to have the same looming effect as a taller shed for neighbors. So now we're outside of fire safety concerns, but we still have concerns about having a large structure right up against a property line as a shed. So staff looked at scaling the distance requirements from the property line to allow for some of those smaller sheds to be close to a property line. And so we've provided for 3 tiers of distances for sheds that are, or accessory structures that are under 9 feet. They can be up against the property line so long as there's no ornamental features like eaves extending over the property line, and that if it's tall enough to be perhaps above a fence or something, none of the water draining off of the roof of this accessory structure would be impacting the adjacent property or crossing the property line. And then finally, we also, in the prior recommendations, we're trying to make sure that there's some sort of a maximum requirement on the accessory structure, so you can't just go wall-to-wall sheds throughout your whole side yard, or you'll cover your entire rear yard with sheds. And that 5 foot minimum separation between accessory structures, that the fire department wanted to see helps with that. We also are recommending that there be a percentage of the lot coverage for a rear yard, so accessory structures in the rear yard can't cover over a percentage of that rear yard setback. But since the side yard is smaller, using a percentage number wasn't making as much sense, or it was more difficult to implement. So staff is now recommending, rather than a percentage measurement, that there just be a maximum total square footage of accessory structures in the side yard. So that is, in a nutshell, what we've proposed at this time. The other edits that staff had brought forward to clean up the code and allow, exempt accessory structures from some of the provisions that have prohibited anything in the side yard, or required 10 feet between all buildings. Those provisions are still there, but we've made these adjustments to address your comments from the last meeting.
Thank you, Chelsea. I thought I read, just a quick question, that in the fire code, there's no mention of property lines. Did I read that? Or did I just...
Right, there's no requirement that there be a minimum distance between the property line and the building. In the building code, there's requirements for minimum distances between buildings, but no, the fire code does not require a specific distance from the property line. The Santa Barbara Fire Department, again, likes to see a 3 foot wide corridor that they can get through. That does not have to be against the property line. And that all that the fire code requires is that you be able to that there has to be a fire access road within 150 feet of an exterior wall of a building.
Okay, thank you.
The other important element that was included in this is in regards to the height of the accessory structures. And based on the discussion that we had last time, we let the height limit be 24 feet. That's compendium with ADU ordinance. So it doesn't go to the full 35 feet that's allowed in residential zone.
Thank you, Lori. Forgot about that piece.
Okay. Is that the end of your report?
No.
Okay. Questions continue?
I think this concludes our report.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that concludes staff.
So the answer was yes.
Yes, sorry.
Okay. So, are there any questions before we go to public comment? You want to wait until we bring it back?
No, I'll wait till we bring it back. I've just got some clarifications, but I'll just do it to a discussion. Thank you.
Okay. With that, we'll go to public comment. Is there any, again, I have no speaker slips. Is there anybody here that would like to speak? Please come forward. State your name, please.
Hello, good evening. Rovi Butcher. I do have a question about the 5 feet between accessory structures. And I don't know if that's required, recommended, or can that be reduced? It's on page 46 of the packet. And it starts out under the recommendations. Second paragraph, the proposed amendments now require a minimum of 3 foot wide corridor, which we mentioned, and that there be a minimum 5 feet of separation between adjacent accessory structures. I don't know why it has to be 5 feet. If the corridor is 3 feet, why 5 feet? If 5 feet is required for the firefighters to, throw their ladders up against the roof, do we really need 5 feet? Can that be reduced? That's one of my questions. And another thing I have to bring up is, it seems like the side yard issue has to deal with a gate, an entrance to, sorry, let me just read my notes here. The side yard setback seems to apply to side yards with gates. As it is clear, the recommendations do focus on accessibility and fire safety. Do the same recommendations apply to side yards without gates? So if there is no gate, there is no entrance. Do those rules apply to the side gates that don't have, the side yard that don't have gates? So that's my question. Because if they can't access it, they would have to, if they can't access the side yard with no gate, they would have to access the other side of the house. And the 150 feet of hose will still be able to get to that side gate where the accessory units are. So that's one of my questions. At this point in time, I would like to ask the members of the Planning Commission if you have a copy of the letter of complaint from Ann Nicholas. Do the members of the committee have a copy of that? Because I think at this point, it would be crucial to read that. There is a line in her letter. Zena, is it possible to bring it up?
It's not included in the current agenda packet, but it was submitted to the Planning Commission when we first started.
Yeah, if I could read a line from her letter. Her letter was dated February 3, 2021. And the second to the last paragraph, she says, "We really do not want to file a complaint against all these families." And these are the 20 homes that were listed. "We only want to keep our shed where it is, just like the rest of our neighbors." So that line is, she's using these 20 homes as a reference to prove her point. So she's not really filing a complaint letter, because there is none. There is no complaint. It's just a referential point to make her case. So I wanted to point that out because I don't think there is a complaint letter. And if there is a complaint letter, there should be 20 complaints based on the number of homes that were being cited, right? But that is not the case. So at this point, I believe our ask, and we might have other asks here, we are asking to either reduce the distance between the sheds and or to accommodate or grandfather these existing sheds where no one is actually complaining. Again, the letter from Ann Nicholas is not a complaint letter. It's a referential point to prove her case. And the second ask would be for the city council really to drop the current enforcement or make some more recommendations or accommodations for these affected homeowners. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Hey, good time. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments here? Please.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Neal, and Skip Mesa resident. I just have a comment or question regarding corner lots in regards to accessory structures. There it seems like there was a lot of allowances for other structures on regular lots in terms of what they can do and what they can't. But for corner lots, specifically where sheds are typically found, where they're on the side of the street, so the street side of the house, the ordinance says something to the effect that you cannot have any accessory structure that is closer to the street than the principal resident. And this is affecting a lot of us because since the garage is typically on the street side of the principal structure, that's a natural place to find your shed. And I think you'll find that to be the case in a lot of different lots in a neighborhood. So there's little we can do with that shed, unfortunately, if that ordinance still stands as it is. So I just wanted to point that out, and hopefully you will consider that as a factor here in terms of the corner lots are being kind of called out specifically as being unavailable to have any kind of allowance for their sheds. Thank you.
Any further comments? Seeing none here, how about online? I see a hand.
Hello, my name is Jay Carsman. My wife Adrienne and I live in Skip Mesa. I do want to compliment the Planning Commission, the planning staff, Chelsea. Really, I want to just recognize how hard you're all working to find a good solution. It seems like a simple problem, but it's complicated. I would like to offer my support to Rovi's comments with respect to considering if you can grandfather in the existing very small sheds that have already been installed, and in some parts of the city, all of Solvang, there are many, many very small sheds that have been in place for many, many years. Some are in side yards, some are in backyards. I understand that it rather complicates the whole issue, but it seems like it would just be such a good step in the right direction if you didn't have to dedicate enforcement resources kind of all time in the future to deal with this very small problem. But that said, thank you so very much. And once again, my wife and I are most grateful to you all for your really wonderful efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments online? Or on the phone? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission.
If I may add a couple of points to the comments that were brought up. In regards to the letter from last year, that particular owner, through working with the city, actually removed their shed. And because of the adjacent neighbor's complaint, which dominoed into all of the other sheds being identified. So that particular shed owner chose to remove their shed because it didn't meet the city's code. The question that came up in regards to the sheds that are along the side yard, which is visible from the street, are required to meet their front yard setback requirements. And one of the reasons is because of the fact that you can see the sheds from the street if they're higher than 6 feet. And so it's a visual impact to the neighborhood to see those sheds in that side yard, front yard determined setback area. And that is a number of the complaints that were filed were because those sheds were so visible from the street. And the ordinance does not make a distinction of the corner lots having a reduced setback or anything like that. So I think what we're trying to do is address the concerns that were raised during this last year and a half about the sheds in Skip Mesa as well as throughout the city, and upgrade based on your recommendations and what we'll take to the city council and try to resolve these issues.
I may also add one more comment there, and please, commissioners, let me know if you'd like me to answer some of the questions that were asked. But I wanted to note that the provision that was discussed about corner lots, which if you look at page 65 of your packet, was section E of, subsection E of 1112-2. It would be, assuming these recommendations are accepted, would become subsection F. So it says for a corner lot back in, E, subsection E would become subsection E, was currently D. So no accessory structure on a corner lot shall be located closer to the street right of way or center line than the principal building on that lot. And then it continues, nor within any side or front yard setback. This is an error by staff, but we should have also indicated that the side in that sentence, that last clause, be deleted, because we're trying to allow for sheds in the side yards, but this would still not allow, on the side yard that is along the street, not allow sheds closer to the street than the principal structure. So just wanted to clarify that and note for the commission that staff would recommend, in addition to the edits shown and recommended, that word side be deleted from that subsection. And apologies for missing that in our markup here of the recommendations.
Chelsea, can I make a comment? It's also on page 51,
yes,
which wasn't changed, but now that you mentioned that brought up one of my points. If you see it on page 51, I think it's the same language, D, sorry, 1112-2, D.
On page 51?
Correct. Again, I want to take out the side again.
Yeah, so page 51 is the current section 1112-2. So that doesn't reflect any of the staff's recommendations. The page that I was pointing you to is the page that was supposed to show all of staff's recommendations, but we omitted that one deletion of side there.
So everything on page 51, that's gone. That will be gone.
Not everything. It's edited as shown by the bold underlined or strikeout, starting on page 63, that has the recommended edits shown in the black bold underline or strikeout to section 1112-2. So there's some of that original language is maintained, but there's other language that's added or and some things struck.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So D is replaced, under D on page 64, replaces page 51, D, got it. And that side is taken out.
Yes, but I'm noting for you all that the edits on page 65 don't reflect the deletion of the word side, but they should have.
Okay, thank you, that solved the problem. Any other comments?
Yeah, that issue D, I've been hearing a lot about. The thing is, it's kind of discriminatory to the people with side, that have corner lots, because the way the lot is shaped, they may not be able to put favorably, they don't really have a side yard. They won't have anywhere else to put their shed, so, and I mean, it makes the most sense for the usable space of their backyard. So, as far as, I mean, I don't see, if it's not, a site for sore eyes, I guess was the right way for it. Is there a way to incorporate the backyard within that, within the city on the roadside? Because that's kind of discriminatory to those people that have it, where you're saying, hey, you guys with a side yard can put a shed, but you guys on the corner lots, you can't put a shed.
I can address that if you'd like. I think the issue is more that on a corner lot, the side yard is actually more akin to a front yard setback because it faces the street. And so there are different considerations for placement of structures essentially in front of the primary building in relationship to the street. This requirement that no accessory structure on a corner lot be located closer to the street or right-of-way center line is in the current code. So accessory structures that are in a side yard along the street side of a corner lot are honestly not in compliance with the code as it currently is. So that's not something that we're adding here tonight. And prior discussions with staff has not received any recommendations from the commission on whether how to address that. Certainly it's within your purview to recommend changes to that requirement, but again, that's something that it has been on the books, and anyone who has a corner lot now that has a side yard or shed, along the street side of their house, whether it's in the front or the side, would not meet that requirement that's currently in the code.
So how do we make that recommendation going forward so that, because what I'm hearing from people too is asking for grandfathered in, if they have it, no one's complained about it. Going forward, how do we make that recommendation if it's technically it's in the backyard, but because it's a corner lot, it's considered front yard is what I'm understanding, but it's still the backyard. So how do we make that recommendation? How do we do that? So what I'm trying to do is make it functional for the most amount of people in Solvang, so that it's not a nuisance to everyone who has invested in a shed or bought a home with a shed that's in place and no one's complained about it.
Yeah, so as a commission, if you, through your discussions, decide to make that recommendation, you just have to include that in your motion that you'd like to recommend, XYZ adjustment to this provision to city council, and staff can, make that change before these amendments go to city council. Again, it's not part of the current proposal by staff because it hadn't come up, or we hadn't received direction from the commission on that front, but certainly if it's the will of the majority of the commission to make that recommendation, we can incorporate it before we bring it to city council.
Where would that correction be in the regulations?
So it's in the same section that I brought up, which is in section 11-12-2. Currently it's subsection D, but if the staff's other recommendations are made to City Council, it would become subsection E. And so it's on page 65, which if you view it on page 65, it shows it in the context of staff's other recommendations. And it says no accessory structure on a corner lot shall be located closer to the street line of the right-of-way or center line than the principal building on that lot, nor within any side or front yard setback. And so at this time, staff is only recommending that the word side be deleted from that last clause because we're trying to allow accessory structures inside yards, but staff has not recommended any change to the first clause of the sentence, which I think is the one that is at issue, that accessory structures have to be located farther, not any closer than the principal building to the street on a corner lot.
If I may also, if you do move it to the opposite corner on a corner lot, it's gonna be more of a nuisance and more of a watershed issue to the four corners, if you will, of the neighbors in the back corner, because the shed will be closer and more of a nuisance to their backyard, because it's not gonna be seen from them where it's located now, if it's on the other side.
I don't have a problem allowing accessory structures on corner lots, on a side corner lot. I would hate to see them be 24 feet tall.
Right.
I would hate to see them be 0 lot line right to the fence.
Right.
So we came up with a compromise of some height and some setback, not 0 lot line like we're allowing on a side yard if it's small. Our code, all codes always take corner lots and say you have 2 fronts for setback from center of streets. That's where you have an advantage of having a corner lot. You've got no neighbors on 2 sides, and there's a disadvantage, which means your setback has to be the same as a front yard setback. I'm happy, I can go along with though making that exception for accessory structures if we came up with a 9 feet height maximum and some setback from the fence.
I think that's a common sense solution. I think that would be favorable to everyone, because most sheds that you buy, they're little plastic ones, they're 7 feet tall. I mean, you have to duck to get into them. They're not very
But
big.
you can't.
But you don't want to go 24 feet tall. I agree.
Yeah.
And I think that's common sense all around. It's like, you don't want to have, a watchtower on the corner,
Right.
or a lighthouse.
So how do we can, is this the time to try to come up with the language for something like that? Or are we still going through questions and answers?
Chelsea, can we just recommend that you come up with appropriate language
Well, it's the
for
height
this,
and
or do we
setback.
have to give you that language?
We need to give her height and setback.
Yeah.
I would suggest that the commissioners discuss the standards that you would like to apply to the accessory structures on a corner lot, side yard facing the street. As Commissioner Peterson is pointing out, what I'm hearing is that it shouldn't just be any shed that's allowed, but staff would need your direction on what size sheds and how far away from the property line you would be recommending.
A simple thing to do would be, and I don't know if it solves solutions or not, but simple thing to do would be that the corner lot has a front yard, it has 2 side yards, even though it fronts a street. So whatever a side yard setback is where a structure has to remain. It can't get to the 0 or the 3 feet. It has to be the 10 feet or 7.5 or whatever that zone requires for a side yard setback. Because if I'm on an acre, my setback's gonna be different than if you're on a smaller one. So to put footage in there, we're doing that with the side yards in the rear, I get, but maybe on the 2 front yard, the corner lots, we actually hold it to the side, what a side yard setback would be on that given piece of property, and keeping it to a 9-foot height. And that'd be my motion. That'd be my solution. 9 feet seems like that way you can have an 8-foot plate and get water shedded off. And that's probably why staff went to 9 and not 8, because then you're stooping in. So I'd keep it at the 9, which makes it work, keep it at the side yard setback. As simple as that. I don't know if that works for everybody or even the audience, but.
Could I make one other suggestion in regards to that? Most side yards have an established fence already. So you definitely want, because the property line goes out to maybe the backside of the sidewalk, and there's landscaping and then a fence. So you don't want the shed going to the property line. You want it behind the fence.
Yeah, correct.
The fence is usually 6 feet high.
There you go. So you say it must be behind a fence.
Right.
A side yard fence, 10 feet from a side yard fence.
Maximum 9 foot.
9 foot height.
And then there already is an ordinance for accessory structures. It's within less than 144 square feet, and less than 10 feet tall.
120.
It's 120 square feet, yeah, there you go. So,
Less than 12 feet.
yeah, and less than 12 feet, I mean.
And the issue has been that the 12-foot high sheds are the ones that people are starting to see more and more of,
Right.
especially when people put several in a row in their side yard and you can see them from the street. Those are the concerns that, at 12 feet high or 10 feet high. And it's just this, the scale of what some people are doing has been part of the reason why these complaints.
As long as it's not excessive, I mean, it isn't, I mean.
Yeah, and that's why I think the idea of saying 200 square feet, which is in the ordinance now as proposed, behind a fence, along a side yard, on a corner lot, is appropriate.
Okay.
Anything more than 200 square feet, that becomes basically another building along the side yard.
Right, and then does that 200 square feet, is that the maximum per structure, or is that maximum total for the lot?
Maximum total in the side yard.
Yeah, so, I mean, then everyone should be able to have one storage shed, put their, slip and slides and lawnmowers and, rakes and hose and all that stuff.
And along that line, that 200 square feet, I was going to bring it up later, but we'll bring it up now because we're talking about it. That section is, I'll get it. I'll find it here somewhere. It's on page 64D.
It's 4C.
No, it's not, I'm sorry, it's on page 65. Page 65, the first C as you come down, right above 5. That's the 200 square feet.
Correct.
It would
Oh,
seem
there
to
it is,
me
yeah.
that I would recommend, it says the cumulative total square footage for all accessory structures in each side yard. Otherwise, you're limited to 200 on the entire both side lots. I know what we're trying to do is not have it, but do you care if it's 200 here and 200 here? I don't. So I was gonna add the word each on that, and the only reason I'm bringing it up now is because we just chatted about it. So if that is acceptable language, the 9 foot, the fence, 200 square feet on each side, including the corner lot side, is that enough direction for Chelsea to draft something?
Okay, if I could just go over
Yeah.
what we've talked about. I understand the 200 square feet in each side yard. My understanding is that was staff's intention to look at a side of the building independently, not collectively. Look at, count 200 square feet for side yards together, but one side of the building, so that makes sense for clarification. As far as the corner lot, I understand the recommendation is to allow sheds that are below 9 feet tall, behind a fence, and not within the side yard setback. Like, you have to have so anybody whose side yard is just the setback size is going to be stuck. But if they have a bigger lot that has more property next to the house than the minimum setback requirement, then they would put a shed. Am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, and I also think that by definition, a corner lot, that house has to be the same setback as a front yard, so they will always have more room. Because a house can't be, what is it, 40 feet to center line or 50 feet to center line, I can't remember. And so therefore, that side yard, in other words, we don't want to punish them, but if it's screened by a fence, then it's a side yard setback, which is what that, whatever that zoning calls for a side yard setback. They will always have that, because the structure, principal structure, can't be any closer than what a front yard setback is.
Right.
Okay.
Am I correct?
I mean, Laura, you have to weigh in on that, please.
You're right. The standard for the side yard is
Front yard.
Is a front yard. So normally within developed neighborhoods, you will have about 10 feet on the backside of the sidewalk, landscaped, then you have a fence, and then you have usually another 5 to 10 feet to the house.
Yeah.
And that's the issue that we're dealing with on the corner lots, is what does it look like behind the fence? There's very rarely that you'll see a shed standing by itself on a corner lot without it being behind a fence.
Well, and in fact, instead of saying behind a fence, we could just say fully screened by 6 foot fencing. So that we know, I mean, it could be a split rail fence or a picket fence on a side yard, they put up this big structure. So if everyone's in agreement that it's the 6 foot fence, they can build a 6 foot fence without a permit. They can go to 9 without a building permit, as long as they stay under the 120 square feet and they're under the 12 feet. But we're saying 9 feet, and it's the side yard setback of whatever it is, and then fully screened. So
fully screened.
And I don't think anyone would put their shed on the outside of the fence anyway, because
they might. They might. If you can't, you gotta do the law just for the people that will do it. I mean, and then you're just objective. That's the prosecutor and me coming out. See.
So what we will do is I'll work with Chelsea and we'll come up with the wording on that. And I think we got good direction. And we can include that as part of the motion to move on to the city council.
Okay.
And if I could just say, it'll probably be something along the lines, just to give the commission the opportunity to weigh in. It'll be something along the lines of no accessory structure on a corner lot shall be located closer to the street right away or center line of the principal building within any front yard setback. And then accessory structures may be located in the side yard of a corner lot, provided, facing the street, provided the accessory structure is fully screened behind a fence and no taller than 9 feet. Something like that.
I would just say fully screened behind a 6 foot
Okay.
fence, not a, so we don't get into designing fencing there.
Okay. So something along those lines, and then I guess we might have to add language to say that it has to be, we have to still maintain the side yard setback.
And it'll be the 200 square foot maximum coverage. And
But I think
conditions.
that would still apply because,
That's a blanketed statement.
yeah, that provision applies to all accessory structures in the side yard. But we'll make sure that that is clear. Okay, so with that, I think we do have enough direction to, insert something for city council to review consistent with your recommendations.
Thank you, Chelsea. And that doesn't have to come back to us again. It can go to city council. The changes will be made now.
Yes.
Right.
When they go to city council.
That's why I made us go through the exercise to try to come up with some standards now.
I'm getting a lot of nods in the audience, so I'm hoping that's agreeable to fix this once and for all.
So let's move on from that to any other comments. Do you have other comments, Joni? Scott?
Well, as usual, I've got some comments. We go to page 48, and we go to B, G, and it's highlighted. Page 48, BG, and then if we turn the page to 49, 105.2, that's highlighted. 105 105.2, and then we go to page 50, 105.2, work exempt from permit. We're not making changes to this, but is there any way that they should be written the exact same? The one talks about exemptions are, and it says sheds, playhouses, doghouses, gazebos, pergolas, similar structures that are not, and then the next one, one-story detached tool and storage shed, playhouses, similar uses, but it doesn't list all those others. And then on page 50, and this is not your guys' work product, this is it, it's been here. The other one lists similar uses. It just seems like those three definitions of exemptions should be the exact same 7 words, but that's just my nitpicky, and maybe we can't change it because it's not on the agenda to change this section.
It's more that, if I can jump in and address, thank you for noting that. We can certainly, when it's time to go back and re-up the building code adoption, we can look at that as a potential item to amend, but there are specific procedures in state law for amending substantive building code provisions, so we won't be able to do that tonight. Make those changes, but certainly that's a good thing to look out for when this, there's another building code update and the city goes to adopt the codes and make their local changes to them, which is what you're seeing here with sections 10-1-4 and 10-1-5. Those are solving amendments to the state building codes, but in order to do that, there's specific procedures and findings that have to be followed, which we're not set up to meet those requirements this evening. But I appreciate you pointing out that there is some inconsistency, because that's certainly something that, as staff can look at the next time.
Yeah, just to avoid
about the
confusion.
building
Yeah,
codes.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next is on page, if I don't know if this can be looked at, I think it can because it's under our zoning regs, but I'm not 100% sure. Page 53, and I guess this was just a question I had. It's stating there under D that distance between buildings on the same site must be 10 feet. So therefore, do we need to note an exception here between, because we already have it at 5 feet for accessory structures. This is saying it's got to be 10 feet. And then we also are saying that the fire department just needs 3 feet to get by. But if we're already saying you've got 10 feet, absolute, between any structure and a dwelling, you've got your 10 feet, which is bigger than we want. We might even want to take it down to 3 feet between the structures. So can that be looked at, or is that in the same category?
So if you go to page 62 of your packet, you'll see that staff has recommended a change to that section to exempt accessory structures from that provision, so that the requirements in 11-12-2 as amended, which include the 3 feet and the 3 feet corridor and the 5 feet between accessory structures along a side yard. Those are kind of going in 2 different directions, if you can imagine that. The corridor is, parallel to the building, and then the 5 feet between accessory structures would be, in between those structures as they are placed next to the building. So this distance requirement of a minimum of 10 feet between a building and any other structure, that would not apply to accessory structures anymore. And that is one of the kind of general provisions that staff had identified in the code that was making accessory structures basically not be allowed at all under the current code. And we've amended that by exempting accessory structures from that requirement, and then the accessory structures have to meet the requirements in section 11-12-2 instead of this requirement. So yes, we can change that provision, and we are proposing to do so.
Okay. Page 63, C at the bottom, setback requirements. non-residential, we're keeping the 10 feet, if I'm seeing that correct.
Yes,
Okay.
and that is open for your recommendation if you wish to make a recommendation to city council and direct staff to make changes to that section. We can certainly do that. The direction that we received previously was only to address accessory structures in residential districts. So this section applies to non-residential districts, but it's in our zoning code, and it's certainly within your purview to review that section and provide recommended changes if you wish.
No, I'm fine with that in commercial. I just want to clarify that people don't think we're doing it in commercial zones. They still have to have the 10 foot between. It's all residential that we're really focused on, I think. Let's see. I had a question on, I would recommend that we reduce the space in between the accessories to 3 feet from 5 feet. If we're saying that it's got to be, that all fire needs is 3, you can be 3 to your house, and therefore why can't they be 3 between each other? That would be my recommendation, that we would move that 5 foot to 3 foot wherever it has that.
The only comment was that as they're staging the ladder, and the ladder is about 2.5 feet wide, and then you need a fireman to get between 2 sheds and get on the ladder, they need some room. And so.
But am I wrong? Can't these exceptions, we've made the exception that they don't have to be 10 foot apart from a house.
Right.
We're saying they can be 3 feet to a house.
Correct.
So I would think consistently we would go 3 feet between them. It seems more important that they'd have more room between a house and that. And if we're recommending 3 to the house and accessory structure, why not 3 between the accessory structure? That's, again, consistency. To me, it seems so much better to be 3, or make them all 5, make them all 10, make them 3.
I think the difference is the 5 foot between the accessory structures was for placement of ladders, whereas the 3 foot between the house and a structure was for a person to walk by with a hose. So as I recall from the fire department discussions, that they asked for 5 foot so that they would have room to set up a ladder.
So you're looking at putting the base of the ladder up to the roof between 2 sheds and getting a person to get up that ladder.
No, I get it. I just don't understand the difference between that and we're allowing a shed to be at the property line.
Right.
It's a small one. Then we're allowing them to have 3 feet between the house and that shed. How are you putting a ladder up there any easier than between 2 sheds?
You don't. Well, that's why they're asking for 5 foot space between sheds.
But they're not asking for 5 foot between your home and a shed. You still have to put a ladder up.
Yeah, but they're saying that they're not, if they, I don't know, say if it got 3 sheds, a 5 foot, one in the middle, 5 foot space, you could put up 2 ladders. So that's what they're talking about. They're not talking about putting up a ladder between a shed and the house. They're asking for a space where they is dedicated to putting up a ladder if needed.
I understand what you're saying, I just disagree with it. It doesn't make sense to me at all. It just seems like it doesn't make sense. It's not consistent, but that's okay. I just want to bring it up.
Can I make a comment? Can I make a comment real quick?
Sure.
My son's a firefighter, and he says if there's a fire, it doesn't matter if it's 3 feet, 5 feet. They will slam that ladder up to try to put the fire down. So 3 feet, 5 feet, if there's a fire, that ladder's going up, right? So, sorry. Thank you.
Well, that kind of dovetails to my next statement that you brought up about the side yard, the gate situation. I believe that if there's a fire, they're knocking the fence down and going through it. So the setbacks ought to probably still apply even if there's a gate or no gate. So I took your comment to heart, but I thought, they're gonna go through that that fence, no matter what. Yeah, they'll go in. The only,
So before you go on,
yep,
do we have an agreement on
the 3 or 5?
commission? 3 to 5?
I think 3 is fine with me.
Yeah,
3's fine with me.
well,
I'm not sure that it is up to us, is it?
that's just what I was gonna ask.
Is it up
Is
to the
this
fire
a
department, not us?
requirement from the fire department, or
Those are recommendations.
just a nice to have request?
So it's not a requirement of the state fire code. The Santa Barbara Fire Department said that they like to see, they would request, recommend, that there be 5 feet between accessory structures. The 3-foot requirement doesn't have to be between the building and the accessory structure. It's just a corridor in the side yard somewhere that is 3 feet wide, that's clear. So you could accommodate that with a corridor between the house and the accessory structure. It could be the accessory structure is closer to the house and the corridor is along the property line. You know, that is more flexible, but they like to be able to have a 3-foot walkway essentially that goes along the side yard. But the 5 feet is, you know, between, if you're facing the house, you want to see 5 feet between, they want to see 5 feet between the accessory structures, but that is not a fire code requirement. So you can change it if you wish to make that recommendation. Staff included the recommendation, amendments consistent with the Santa Barbara Fire Department's suggestions, because operationally that's what they like to see. But again, it's not a fire code requirement. So there is some flexibility to make adjustments if you so wish.
So then to answer Chair Williams' question, is it nice to have?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
It's a nice to have.
Yes, it's a nice to have.
Okay, so we in agreement then to cut it to 3?
3 feet.
3 feet?
Shake your head, yes or no? Yes.
3 is fine.
And I think,
You guys are
I
awesome.
think I've got my last point. Let's see here. Where did I do it? I know, I gotta look, I'm so sorry. It's on page 65, C. We did that, didn't we? We turned the totals in each side yard. Oh, I know. Under C again, where we talked, that's the 200 square foot, and we added the each in each of the side yard. Is it side yard setback or is it in the side yard? It's not the setback, it's the side yard. Okay. If we look at then page 64, A, D, A, the first box there. And it's just silly wording, but maybe it says minimum distance from property line, and I know it's under the rear property line, but maybe we could just say minimum distance from rear property line right there. And then in the box at the bottom, minimum distance from side property line. So we just clarified that's the rear, that's the side. I mean, anyway, that's nothing other than just doing that. And then the last comment I would just make, just in general, is folks have brought it up, and I've run into people in town who have said, golly, this whole thing on complaint driven and code enforcement officers and things like that. Personally, I'd like it to get codified the way that we all want it, so that you feel good about buying a $3,000 tough shed that's 10 by 12, that's under 12 feet of square feet, and you don't, or in height, and you don't have to go get a permit. We just want to know it. We don't want to just, oh, you guys are grandfathered in and they're not, but they are, and then they, just make it simple, easy. And I don't know, this is a question for Chelsea in general. We changed this. I'm assuming that this is the new law. If it be folks that had complaints against them, their pending enforcement, it will be dropped. You're not gonna make them move them and then put them back to where they were before, as long as they meet the current new code. Is that correct, Chelsea?
Yes, I believe so. If the code, if the city council, whatever the city council adopts based on your recommendations, once that's in place, then code enforcement would enforce the code as it is after that.
And all these enforcements are kind of being held right now. I'm understanding us pending this. Okay.
Right.
Those were my questions.
Good, thank you. So, nobody has anything else, can I get a move to approve this resolution number 2202 and send it on to the city council with changes as discussed this evening?
So moved.
Moved in second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you,
If I could
Chelsea.
just ask for one clarification, was there a majority of the commission agreement with Commissioner Peterson's last comment to clarify the titles in those charts on page 64?
If they'll fit in the box.
Yeah.
You want to
I heard Commissioner Peterson say it, but there wasn't much
It's just
discussion.
a clarification. I thought we were including that, but
Okay, well, that's what I'm trying to understand, if that was the will of the council. I mean, excuse me, the commission.
nod your head, yes or no? You
Yes.
agree?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
On to our last item.
Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yes,
Thanks for the hard work.
appreciate it. Great job. We appreciate your hard work.
Public hearing to consider providing a recommendation to the city council on general plan, annual report, and adopt a categorical exemption. Lori, can you give us a report on this? 72.
One of the requirements in state law is that the city, any jurisdiction, provides an annual report on how they're meeting their housing requirements as well as implementing their general plan. You've seen this report in the past, and we've gone through it and updated it for any changes that have occurred over the last year in regards to housing and general plan law. And we've also provided the update on the number of units that have been approved over the last year. We've had one single-family lot home, we've had 3 accessory dwelling units, and 1 junior ADU. And so it's one of our slower years as far as permits being issued. The interesting thing is that we did in 2000 have several projects come through that were approved by the Planning Commission. The one particularly on 539 Alisal, and then the one over on 670 Alamo Pintado. Those projects were approved, but they had not pulled their building permits in that period of time. I did want to note in our update of projects, we are going to be issuing the 539 building permits here within the next, they've finally got their cost estimates in and they're ready to pay their fees. And so that particular project will be under construction here soon.
The field behind John?
Correct.
Yes.
Ken Hunter as well.
Yeah. So the information that's provided to you also is our last report for the arena numbers that were assigned in 2014 to 2022. The city has met their obligations through the process over the last 8 years as far as the different income levels based on different kinds of units that have been approved over the years and built. We are now, as is noted in your report, been assigned new RENA numbers. And those RENA numbers will need to be incorporated into the housing element, but we will also be monitoring them as we go through 2022 and forward. Those numbers of any building permits that we issue can be to the new RENA numbers. So we now basically close a chapter in the dealings with the housing element through the last 8 years, and we're opening up a new chapter as far as reporting goes. The other sections of the document talked about the update to the general plans. As noted previously, we've had various sections of the general plan updated over time. With this comprehensive review, all of the elements will be updated and found internally consistent, as well as addressing new requirements such as environmental justice and fire hazards, which are new sections to planning law that need to be addressed in the general plan. So the recommendation today is to accept the report and forward it on to the City Council for their review. And we need to file this report and all of the related information by April 1st.
April Fool's Day.
So you need a motion?
Yes.
Do we need to go to public comment on this?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You want to go home, huh?
So we'll take this to public comment. There's nobody here. Is there anybody online that wishes to comment? My phone. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission for action. Questions, comments?
I'll move approval and sending it to city council unless there's discussion.
I don't have any discussion. I agree with her.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. And our last item was pulled. So are there any other comments from the commissioners that we want to go through? Planning staff comments. Anything further? No? We're adjourned. 8:04.